Hey everybody, wanted to do a quick follow-up video to this SAMA 205A case that I did a little mini review of a few weeks ago. And as you can see, I finally put something in it. So I had a friend of mine from work that I used to work with that called up and said that he was having a problem with his computer. It was an account problem. And he wanted to know if I could fix it, and I said sure. And I got so sick of seeing his old busted up case that he's had forever that I said, screw it, I'm putting it in this one. So we're going to talk about real quick the shortcomings and how it was to build in it. Really wasn't too bad to build in. Now, a couple things I'll show you. One, right down here on the side, you can see right here, we've got 4 holes, and that would be for an SSD to mount underneath. Cool. On the bottom, you have a removable hard drive tray, and on that one, you also have a section on the top for a SSD, a 2.5-inch SSD to be mounted to it. Now, it mounts on the underside of the cage, and your screws come down from the top of the cage. Inside the cage, you have room for a 3.5-inch hard drive, and that's actually what we've got in the bottom of this. We've got a 1 terabyte SSD for an operating system, and then another 1 terabyte hard drive underneath it as a storage drive. So we didn't use the one up on the power supply shroud, we used the one down in the cage. Speaking of that cage, though, once you have a power supply in here, so in this case it's an HX750 semi-modular, once you have a power supply in there, it is a tight fit once your cables are in the back. So where that drive cage is, and I've got it as far forward as I can possibly get it, but the plugs that plug into your power supply, and then you have to really 90 them out of the way. I mean, it's not dangerous kind of bending, but it is tight. So it's something to keep in mind, and this is a standard HS750, so kind of what you would consider your standard size power supply. So that kind of depth, and we're only talking 6-7 inches or whatever it is, puts you right at that limit of that drive cage. Now, if you're only using a different SSD and you're using it mounted to the top of the power supply shroud and you take that drive cage out altogether, great, you have all the room in the world. And had I not had that hard drive, I probably would have done the same. Otherwise, though, not hard to build in at all. Again, I do wish there were kind of some grommets around where the cables come through, but they're not sharp. Ouch, that's a fan. Fans are sharp. And everything else went pretty good. Cable management, it's a little tight in the back because it is a fairly small case, but it's not unwieldy. There are spots for zip ties and things. So in this case, it was actually more challenging because of the next downfall of this case, and that is the fans. So in here you can see we have a 120 in the back and 3 120s in the front. Yay! Those fans are all controlled. They're all daisy chained together, and they have a Molex power connector. Without using adapters or anything like that, your fans are spinning at 1 speed all the time. You're just feeding constant power. You don't have control over your fan speeds or curves or anything like that. Now, in this case, it's not going to matter. It's not that big a deal. But it is something to keep in mind of because you don't have any control. So if your fans start getting loud, they start wearing out or something like that, you're basically at that point where it's a cheap enough case where you can't really complain about it. And if you wanted to complain about it and have better fans and a better controller, you'd be spending more on the case. So back and forth, back and forth. But that said, again, it's a very cheap case, and it does come with 4 fans. It seems fine with the airflow side. I mean, I've been testing it, and everything works fine with it. And, yeah, they're not bad. It's just, in this case, he didn't use any Molex drives. They were all SATA drives. So I have a Corsair power supply, so I had to go get a cord out that I could plug into his power supply just for a single Molex connector. But now I have that whole bundle of Molex wires that are now taking up even more cable space because that needed to be done. Anywho, that said, there is one other thing that I wanted to mention real quick, and that is the way that the fans are wired for the lighting. Now, on the back of this case, and I don't have it open, it's all tied up now, but coming out of actually this fan in the back, so this is kind of our master fan, really. This fan has a couple extra wires on the back. One is for an ARGB header, which I have on this motherboard, and as a side note, and I'm not blaming this on the case, but as a side note, I can't get this motherboard to do anything color-wise. It has an ARGB header, but nothing I've used. There's no settings in the motherboard. Some newer motherboards, you can actually set your colors right in the motherboard or set settings in there. Nothing in there for that. And I've tried using ASRock's, I think it's called Polychrome RGB software or something like that, which doesn't have a very good reputation from people I've read on. But no matter what I've tried, I cannot get this thing to cycle or do any colors based on the motherboard itself. Now, I don't know if that's a motherboard issue, a software issue, or if that is just a glorified make you feel better type of thing that plugs in and really doesn't have any bearing. The other wire that comes off of that fan is labeled reset switch. Now, it's got two little pins on the inside, and it's basically for what a switch would plug into. Now, in this particular case, up on the top, you have a power button and you have an LED button right next to it. That's very common in cases that have RGB fans built in. That switch is labeled LED switch, LED SW. At no point in anything or in any of the directions do they tell you that that plug from that LED switch actually has to get plugged into the reset switch pigtail off of that fan in order to let you do things like this. So you can see we've got colors changes, and I'll cycle through them here in a minute just so you can see them all. So on your header coming off your front panel, you've got your power LED, you've got your hard drive LED, you've got your power switch, and then you've got LED switch, which actually plugs into the reset switch pigtail off of the fan itself. You don't actually have a physical reset switch on this computer, on this case at all. There's no reset button, and nothing gets plugged into your reset switch in the motherboard itself. So if you need to change anything, if you need to reset, you're holding down your power button. You don't have a reset button. Anywho, let me get back. I'll just try to show you I'll cycle through real quick the RGB colors on this thing so you can see it, and then we'll call it good. So bear in mind that his 980 is a little tired, but here's the colors you've got. Now we had blue, we went to white, green, now we've got like a purple, then we've got off, then we've got kind of a gradiated spinning color wheel. All right, so we're good there. One more, and then we've got kind of more of a pulsing color changing. Now we've got kind of a spinning color change, so you can see as it spins around, the colors are changing. Breathing color changing. Kind of a strobe-like color changing. Same thing with just different colors. And then we go to solids. So there's our red, green, blue, white, yellow, cyan, magenta, off. So there you go. There's the colors that come with this. And I'm going to let him do what he will with how he wants it. And whatever. So there we go. But anyway, now that I've built in it, I just kind of wanted to touch on my thoughts real quick, do a little mini follow-up. Everything else worked fine, though. I mean, I'm able to get the back panel closed, even with the tight cables in there. The motherboard went in fine. I did have to add one more of the standoffs, but they actually did come with it. And all the screws were included, all that stuff. I've got a whole baggie of extra screws left over somewhere. They did give you some zip ties in the back for stuff like that. Everything else seems to work pretty well. Really, the only downfall is, other than the wacky wiring, just not having speed control for your fans. But again, for the price, it's kind of hard to argue that point. But it is what it is. Anyway, there you go. Yeah, that's my follow-up on this SAMA 205A. Take care. Thanks.